Hey everybody, welcome back to Dental Unfiltered. I'm Matt Brown. I'm here with my normal co-host, Dr. Andrew Vallo. And we have a really good subject. I probably get talked to about this on a couple levels a few times a month. And a lot of practices we onboard have an opinion about this. And I think this goes a couple different ways. And it's about expanded hours, like Fridays and Saturdays and that kind of stuff. I think there's some misconceptions about it involving staff and lots of things. And Andrew just made a big change in his group, and there was a different motivation for it. And I think his motivation is pretty interesting. So Andrew, you just decided to dip your toes in expanded hours. I know 4 years ago or 5 years ago when we first started working together, you had a different view on doing those kinds of hours. And I think you're discovering your motivation is different. I think you're discovering that some people do want to do that. So, Dr. Val, this was your idea. You know, what what sparked your idea to talk about expanded hours? What was the event that made you say this is a worthwhile subject?
Well, Matt, as I often say, most of our episodes are based on what I'm dealing with currently in my group. So, this is something I'm in the process of adding some Saturday hours to some of our offices. And so that being in the thick of it, I thought this would be an interesting topic to talk about. And so I do want to backtrack. I'm the type of person who while I have some strong opinions and some strong views on things, I like to think that I've got an open mind in the sense that if I see data or reason to pivot my approach, um, I'm willing to do it. And often I'm willing to do it pretty quickly, like, kind of stop on a dime type of a thing. So, and a good example of that, I would say, is passing on credit card fees. I was very adamantly against passing on credit card fees to patients for probably 2 years.
I just paid for my truck to get fixed and they passed on my credit card fee, and that's a mechanic. You're a dentist.
Well, yeah, and so we have already done an episode on this. I'm not going to get into that too much, but like my point of that was I went from, hey, I feel like that's nickel and diming patients, I don't think it's worth it, to after seeing enough evidence of enough other dentists that had done it successfully and seeing enough of my vendors that were charging me credit card fees, I said, you know what? Maybe I was wrong about this. I pivoted very quickly, changed my mind, and rolled out, passing on credit card fees. And I'll tell you what, guys, we've been doing that for almost a year now, and I've had little to no complaints from patients and have kept six figures on our bottom line, on our profit, on our EBITDA by passing on credit card fees. So I'm glad that I have that open mind approach and I'm willing to shift gears. And so that's something I'm currently going through with the Saturday hours. So when I first opened my first location, keep in mind, I didn't have a leadership team. I didn't have an office manager. I didn't have an associate. I was the full-time doc, the office manager, the business owner. Um, and at that time, I had some people out there in the dental space recommend being a startup, you should do expanded hours. I had talked to dentists who had opened startups and had opened them 7 days a week. Or sometimes they like open them like random days, hey, we're open Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or whatever it is. And like, hey, it's great. There's less competition. And in my mind, I was like, yeah, that's great. But I also like don't one, I don't really want to be there all weekend. And two, I bet most team members don't want to be there. I bet it's hard to hire team members that want to, work weekends and all that other stuff. So I was very adamantly against that. What I did to hedge things a little bit is I did have, and all of our offices run this way. We've got one day a week. It's either Monday or Tuesday, depending on the office. One day a week where we're open evening hours, where we do appointments as late as 6 p.m. And one day a week where we're open early morning, and it's usually Thursday or Friday, again, depending on the office. Some of ours are Monday through Thursday, some are Tuesday through Friday. But we open early. We open at 7 a.m. So that is for people that are like, I can't miss work. My job's too busy. It's too hard for me to take off work. We've got no problem. We've got evening appointments. We've got early morning. Would you like to come before or after work? So that was our solution. And for most patients, it worked. And I was able to grow a group from 0 to 10 practices, from 0 to right now we're tracking for about 18.5 million in top line this year. I'll let you guys know where things wrap up, but this is mid-October. We've been averaging about 1.8 million the last 3 months, and October halfway through we're on pace for our first $2 million month. So I'll keep you guys updated once, things finalize. But I was able to grow this group
Dude, that's an average of 1.9 million per practice.
for the year.
Yeah, that's your average.
Yeah, I mean, we've got startups that will,
These are juvenile practices.
4 of the 10 practices won't even be open the full 12 months this year. 6 of the 10 have been open less than a year at this point in time.
I say publicly all the time when we speak, and I talk about you. I see the data. I firmly believe you're the greatest startup doc in history.
I mean, I'm just trying to be the GOAT, man. What can I say? Not Tom Brady. Tom Brady is not my GOAT, so I guess I'd have to go maybe like Michael Jordan.
Juvenile practices doing 1.9 million is unheard of, and 10 in a row is really unheard of. So let's go back on expanded hours.
Some of our practices are going to do 3.54. So like there is a little, but all of them should do over $1 million in their first. Every single one has so far, and it doesn't look like we're going to break that trend. So, anyways, my point was I was able to grow this group, not listening to that advice, and I stuck to my guns, and I said, you know what, I don't want to do weekend hours. And I actually, honestly, I had told a lot of our team members like that was something that we weren't going to do. So that it is sometimes difficult to make that change and like difficult to admit that you're going a different direction. But here's the nice thing about it. I didn't do this because I said, you know what? I need to add weekend hours. I did this like how I do most things because a great opportunity presented itself. And after a quick discussion with my leadership team, it was like it would be stupid not to do this. So basically, here's what happened, guys. We've been kind of shifting focus from adding new. Again, we did about 6 offices in 6 months, 6 new startups in 6 months. So that was crazy. We're taking a breath. It's been a few months since we did our last startup. I don't have any projects on the horizon right now. Not that we won't do anymore, but right now we're kind of taking a breather, and I'm shifting our focus to same store growth. So I'm focused on how can we increase services, revenue, profitability at our 10 locations rather than adding more. And so, we did an episode recently. We talked about adding mixed dentition ortho with clear aligners with Candid. We're in the process of adding IV sedation to some of our offices. We have added full mouth implants and like kind of super GPs to almost all of our practices now. So even our general practices typically are offering, those advanced surgical services. We now have docs doing zygos and pterygoids. So I mean, like we really have expanded on that. But again, like there's only so many services you can add. There's only so much production you can do in the hours you're open. And so, I had in the back of my mind for some of our, better performing offices thought, could it make sense to, our offices are only open 4 days a week, guys. So those numbers, that's not Monday through Friday. That is all of our practices are either Monday through Thursday, Tuesday through Friday. And actually a lot of our startups are still 3 days a week. So 3 to 4 days a week, we're doing these numbers. So I had the thought like maybe we do add a 5th day. But I was kind of teetering on it. I hadn't really made a decision. I am in all the dental Facebook groups, including like our local, Tampa Dental Peeps or whatever, the Tampa Dental Jobs, whatever the local ones are. And I just happened to scroll on Facebook and I saw a doc who actually was a doc we had talked to before about potentially joining our group in the future. But I saw this doc post finishing up my time in the military. So, he works at like a military base and, looking for an opportunity to add some Saturday hours. And any office is looking for a doc for Saturdays. Here's my skill set, advanced surgery, IV sedation, yada, yada, yada. So I screenshot it. I send it to my partner, Dr. Sasha. I send it to, and actually this doc listens to the podcast I found out. So he'll probably listen to this episode. I won't call him out by name because I don't know if he wants that or not, but we're excited to have you in our group. By the time this airs, you'll have actually started because we move quickly. But basically looking for some Saturday hours. Anyone interested? I sent it to, my partner and our COO. And I said, what are your guys' thoughts? And we had a quick discussion. It was basically like, hey, this is a no brainer. And the cool thing is, this is in the Tampa area. So we have offices in South Florida that, this guy's in the Tampa area. Because we have 6 offices in the Tampa area, we have a bunch of employees across these 6 practices. We don't necessarily need all the employees at a given practice to work these select Saturdays. So we essentially opened it up to the group and we said, anyone want more hours? Well, we're gonna add. And so what we're doing is we're essentially going to rotate between two offices every other Saturday. We're not going to be open every Saturday, especially with the holidays coming up. There's definitely some Saturdays we're going to be closed. And we kind of worked out a schedule ahead of time with him. So we've got like the next 3 months planned out: November, December, January, which Saturdays are working at which office. This literally all happened within the last week. It was about a week ago that I saw this Facebook post. My COO reached out to this doc, started talking to him. We talked about compensation. We talked about, kind of how the schedule could look. We're going to do 9 to 3. So that the thought for Saturdays was, while some people might want to get up early and just get it over with, a lot of patients might think they want to do that and then decide to hit the snooze button on their alarm clock Saturday. So we didn't want to open too early, and like we don't want to be open too late because the team doesn't want to be there late on Saturday. Patients probably don't want to come in late. So it's a 6 hour day. We're going to try to squeeze as much dentistry as we can into those 6 hours. And so, there's a bunch of things I'm in the process of doing to make this happen. But I'm going to pause for a second. I'll let Matt jump in with any thoughts and questions, and we'll dive into this a little bit more.
We have this conversation a lot with docs, and there's kind of two flavors of docs with this. One flavor is like the common flavor is I want to work 3 to 4 days a week, and that's it. And Fridays and Saturdays are for my family. And if you're a single doc, you want one practice, you want to do 120 to $150,000 a month when you mature as a practice. That's very possible. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like I think that if you want that practice and that's what you're gonna make, that's fine. If you're an aggressive doc, you're gonna grow your practice. I think there is something to be said of convenience of appointment availability for new patients. And the reality is, for the common person to go visit a new dental practice that they don't have a relationship with, it's hard to be motivated Wednesday at 11 a.m. to talk to your boss and get into that practice. And after hours and weekends, Saturdays just create a better variety of convenience for those patients. And usually patients that are new patients to an area either moved in and they already value dentistry, which I think in that scenario, because they already value it, they're fine with making during the week. But there's a whole nother population, which I think is the biggest population of patients that have a lot of work in their mouths, and they finally say that it's time for me to go to a dentist. And these are the $5,000 to $20,000 mouths, and Saturdays are more convenient for them. They just are, and there's something to be said for that. Also, I think there is a staffing problem in dentistry. We hear about it all the time, but I think there's a preemptive scarcity mindset and misconception of like, oh, if I do Saturdays, I really won't have anybody. Listen, there is less money in the system now than ever. Families are hurting. If you go into Walmart and stand in the aisle, people are hunting down great value brand items to save a dollar. Your staff will appreciate that they have the ability to make that extra money on Saturday. A percentage of your staff will. So if you're having lots of staff retention problems, you might want to look at yourself. Like if you're turning people over a lot, you might be a weak leader in the practice. That's very possible. But if your staff values you and there's some way you rotate Saturdays, whatever the strategy is, they might really value having the ability to pick up that day if they want to. Like that might actually retain the really valuable employees.
you know, Dentistry is a tough profession. So like, don't get it wrong. We work hard. Dentists work hard. Hygienists work hard. Dental assistants work hard. All of our team members work really hard. And that's part of why I had these 4-day weeks. So, again, I want to go back and say, I don't think you have to have expanded hours. I don't think you have to be open on the weekends in order to be successful. I will have two practices do over 3.5 million in collections this year on 4 days a week. So, and those are like 8 to 9 hour days. So this is less than 40 hours a week of the office being open. Two different offices will do over 3.5 million. So you don't have to have these expanded hours to grow a successful practice. However, I think it can. Obviously, you increase hours, you have the ability to increase production, collections, all that stuff. My thing when we decided to do this is I told my COO, I am not going to require our teams to work Saturdays because we had never been open before. I had kind of we had always told people like, hey, we're not open weekends. That was one of our sales pitches. So like, I don't want to go out and change it on them and say, you know what, now you have to work Saturdays. So, we've got the blessing of we've got a bunch of employees. We've got, I think, almost 65 employees, 70 employees that work in the general Tampa area. So we've got a lot of employees in the area. So we can draw people from other practices. But let's say you're a single location and you've got a smaller team and you want to open, the expanded hours. You feel like you're growing. You think it'll be helpful. You're young, you don't have kids, or you come across the scenario like I did, where you happen to find a young, hungry associate that's looking for Saturday hours. You can bring in temps. You can hire a 1 day a week hygienist to work that day. And then, patients that come in Saturdays will always see that same temp hygienist. Or again, it's not a temp, it's a 1 day a week. You can hire a 1 day a week assistant. The treatment coordinator, that might be a little bit tougher, but I think you can make it work. So my point is, I think you can add expanded hours without forcing your team to do it. But to Matt's point, it does give them that opportunity if they want to. So I think if you do it correctly, you're not going to make your team mad. You're not going to chase them off, and they'll appreciate the opportunity. And if they don't want to do it, figure it out. If you force somebody to work expanded hours when that wasn't part of the job description when you hired them, I I think it's very possible people may leave, and I think they're probably in the right to do that. So I think you have to approach it in the right way if you want to protect your team morale.
Well, first of all, I have a question for you because docs are gonna be like, "Oh, 3.5 million. How's he doing that?" Real quick, those two practices, how many ops, how many docs?
One of those practices is 7 ops, 2 docs. The other practice is we just expanded from 4 to 5. We're maxed at 5, and we just added a second doc. But that is one of our that's our kind of killer implant practice. So
Just real quick, I can't tell you how often I talk to a doc and they're in that 7 op range in 2 docs, and they're doing like 180, and they're like, "Well, I don't know where I would put people or where I would expand or how could I even do more?" And there's always a way, first of all. I had a practice that had 4 ops. It was 900 square feet. There's 3 doc ops, 1, hygienist op or whatever, and they were doing 4 million. So it can be done, right?
it's effective scheduling. It's
Yeah,
the right procedure
it's
mix.
strategy, not accidental success.
Yeah, yeah, but
Yeah.
I will say at both of those practices, we are kind of bumping up against the ceiling. I'm not saying there wasn't any more room for growth, but on 4 days a week with the total number of ops we had, I was starting to see the writing on the walls that we were starting to get at least near kind of that ceiling potential for those practices. So I do think, it can be effective to add the extra hours there. And that's why I started thinking like, should we add a fifth day? Again, I wasn't originally thinking weekends. I was thinking, adding the, Monday or Friday or whatever. But there is a ceiling. It's a lot higher than most docs realize.
I think there is on some level a staffing issue in dental, but I think it's gotten to I think but I think it's a little bit blown out of proportion.
I think it's a pendulum. So I think after COVID, we had a lot of people leave the dental profession, and I think we had a major staffing shortage. We absolutely did. I do think the pendulum's starting to swing back and correct. I think it's getting more towards the middle now. I think there still is maybe a little bit of a staffing shortage, but I versus 2 years ago, I think it's gotten a lot better. And I think it probably in the coming year or two, I think it will get even better where it might swing the direction of a surplus and it might get easier for offices and you might have more candidates to pick from and all that stuff.
I believe this to be true. It's not founded on any data. I think a lot of docs justify their staffing problems just by saying that.
Oh, well, yeah. Yeah.
And there is a point where like I have a doc in Tennessee. I was just in his practice. Awesome guy. He's been with us for a while now. Really good dude. And he is putting out ads for people and getting like 5 applicants and 4 show or 4 don't show for the appointment. That is a staffing problem. But there are pockets in the area where people say, "Oh, I have a staffing problem. It's so bad in dentistry." I'm like, "What do you mean?" "Well, everyone I get sucks." Once again, going back to it, well, you might not get the most out of you might not be the right leader for a lot of people. And there's some self-reflection there. But on the other side of this, going back to your 1 or 2 day a week, limited hours clinicians and professionals, there's so many times we onboard a practice and I'll talk to them. I'll say, "How many docs do you have?" And they'll say 1.25. I'll explain the 0.25 so I have an understanding. They'll say, "Oh, I have this doc who had her kids or whatever, or a doc that's older and retired, and he or she wants to work 1 day a week." Or then we'll talk about hygienists. They'll say, "Well, I have 2.25 or 2.5." Will tell me about the 2 point. I always got to know about the limited one, so I understand hours capacities. And they go, "Oh, I have this older hygienist. She's been doing it for years. She loves it. She loves patients. She couldn't walk away from her patients, but she only wants to work 1 or 2 days a week. She's kind of semi-retired now." I believe that we're looking at a staffing problem and saying we can't find full-time staff. But I believe there is an untapped staffing market of these individuals out there, and they're more readily available than we realize.
I think it all comes down to how resourceful are you, and how much effort are you willing to put. So in my mind, if no matter what, and I get it. Again, most of our offices are closer to bigger cities in Florida, so there are just more people there. To be fair, so I will say that. But if we need a dentist, a hygienist, an assistant, what we're gonna find them. My between myself, office manager, COO, like we will, we'll call other professionals we work that have temp for us before. We'll sponsor ads on Indeed. We'll post in Facebook groups. We'll, I mean, heck, we'll ask people, just so we meet in other professions if they're like we will find that person. Like we will never be short staffed or not, open a day or not, we'll never do that because we feel like we can't find somebody. And I do think even in areas where it might be that much tougher to find teams, I think there are a lot of dentists that are like, well, I tried.
Oh, and they just walk. I tried. It didn't work. How long do you try for? I tried for a month.
Dentists I know with dentists I've met at conferences and masterminds, and they're like, "Yeah, I've been trying to find a hygienist for a year and a half, and I can't find one." And my response is always like, "Well, how hard are you trying? Like, what are you doing to find like it?" Think about it this way, guys. If you have needed a hygienist for a year and a half, that is limiting your practice's growth capacity. That's limiting the amount of restorative work you're going to get out of it, the number of new patients you can bring in. That should be your number one focus. Like that should take priority over like everything else that you're working on. And you should put all your effort into finding that hygienist until you do. And all of a sudden now it's not important anymore. Rather than half-assing it for a year and a half and it always being on the back of your mind and always thinking, man, I got to find this hygienist, I got to find this hygienist, and just not getting it done. So it's like that's how I approach like I mean, I was just telling Matt before we started recording today, I have never felt more behind on my to-do list. It's like the more we grow every single week, just crap piles up, guys. But I feel like I'm very good at prioritizing things. And I'm like, what are our biggest pain points right now? What are our biggest bottlenecks right now? What is holding our group back the most? And those things go to the top of my to-do list. And honestly, that's part of the reason why I feel so behind on my to-do list because there's a lot of things that just they're not as important. There are things that I want to do. There are things that I think could help my group, but they're not pressing to the point where I need to get them done right now. And even if something new pops up, that's more important, I'm going to go to that thing and I'll keep pushing the other thing down the list. So I think that is an important skill set as a business owner that you need to develop. And you need to realize that if things are holding you back, if things are holding your business back, you need to make that your number one priority and you need to put all of your effort as much as you possibly can into solving that problem until you solve it.
I think expanded hours goes to another topic I want to touch on that is about expanded hours. We generate a lot of phone calls, and I'll look at phone call reporting, and 30 to 40% are unanswered and go to voicemails. And I ask a practice, what's up with that? And they'll say, oh, we stop answering the phones at 4 or 5, or we don't answer them on the weekends. Um, it's we're in 2025 now. If you're not using an answering service after hours or on weekends, you're doing dentistry in like 1991. It's something where it goes back to convenience of availability for a patient. I know for me, I'm slammed today till 5 in the afternoon. Like I don't have a free hour. I could not call a dentist today to make an appointment. And to be transparent, I need to get in for hygiene. My dentist just closed, and I have to go to a new dentist, and he's moving, and it's just the way it is. And I don't have time to do it, and I'm behind on my hygiene. I need to call after hours. There is a point of like it's expanded hours for actual service in the practice, but it's also expanded hours for booking and kind of making sure that the patient can at least communicate on some level. I know Andrew, are you still using Golden Goose?
Yep.
Yeah. Golden Goose is someone we've both been really impressed with, but you need to be booking appointments after the time you're there. Um, Once again, practices I find that aren't doing this are always doing sub $100,000 a month. I mean, like, always.
I just want to kind of recap what Matt said to make sure that you guys caught it. So basically, what Matt just said is there needs to be different ways for patients to schedule appointments during hours that your office is not open. So if you're open 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, people need to be able to call at 7 p.m. and schedule an appointment. Whether it's online with online scheduling, a call center, I think you should have both. I mean, we've got 24/7 online scheduling through Flex, and our Golden Goose, they have extended hours. I think it's I'm gonna probably get it right. It's like 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. or 7:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. or something like that. So they've got expanded hours for their call center. They're also open Saturdays from 9 to 3, which matches our new Saturday hours. So if you are only answering the phone in your practice when your office is open, you're definitely missing a lot of appointments as well. So
We book 25,000 dental appointments a month, and a good percentage of them are after hours, right? I mean, a good percentage. Like, I mean, legally by federal law, we can only book 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Sunday.
oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so it's a federal law that if you're doing communication via text commercially, now my team is going to listen to this, and there's some details I'm probably jacking up, but you cannot book after 8 p.m. or before 8 a.m. You can't communicate via text after or before those hours. So we can only do it Monday through Sunday, those hours. But I'll tell you, so we used to launch only on Fridays, and over the weekend, traffic would be heavy. People want to communicate with you over the weekend on some form. And like Ryan, like Andrew said, you need, a way to book through the website. You need multiple booking avenues for after hours, depending on what the consumer behavior is, because the consumer behavior is not uniform. We have a bad mentality in dental of we have a process we believe is right, and we're trying to shove the patient down that process. And the patient dictates the process with their behaviors to get to the chair. And what you have to do is you have to create a process that is convenient for all patients, not that's convenient for you and the way you want to do things. And I think a lot of this comes back to convenience of availability for the patient to see you, to communicate with you. We have to look at the consumer behaviors. We live in a world of instant gratification. I can order bananas from Walmart and have them.
You really like bananas, don't you, Matt?
I do, as long this is a different story. I do, as long as you're not on a boat, and boaters will understand what I'm talking about. When bananas go on boats, boats have problems, and 2 times that's a fact, and you don't catch fish. 2 times bananas have been on my boat, 2 times my boat's had serious problems, and before I launch my boat, I turn around to ev
This sounds like a boater's myth. Like a
it
little
it's
like
I've seen it so many times, I don't understand it, but it's a good enough superstition for me. The last time we went out where I almost
yeah, I'm
died
gonna
out in the
ask
ocean.
ChatGPT.
Yeah, the last time I went out and almost died in the ocean, different story. I turned around and said, "There's no bananas on this boat, right?" And people thought I was joking. Well, I found out a few months later my neighbor had a banana on the boat. His name's Richard, and I called him and said, "I told you no bananas." He was mad. I thought you were joking. I didn't realize that's a real thing. So anyway, so getting back to it, convenience of
Learn something new
what?
every day.
Yeah, convenience of appointment of availability and convenience of kind of like understanding the consumer behavior and how instant gratification we are in the world and lending yourself and embracing those behaviors, I think will lead to the growth and the modalities of treatment you want to do. I think if you restrict it like a hose and you bend it and you don't get good flow, I think you're going to limit all those things pretty heavily. And I think there's multiple hoses that have to come towards you. And if you say, I only want that hose, you're going to be stuck. That's just the way it is.
I want to try to take down some objections that I've heard other dentists talk about when it comes to, I guess, first, online scheduling. I think The big objection there is, people that schedule online might be more likely to no show an appointment. There are some platforms that allow you to collect a deposit online. I personally wouldn't do that. I personally would not do that. We do take deposits for treatment appointments, and I'll tell you what, when if we build up these Saturdays, like I think we might, I may actually start taking deposits for hygiene appointments for Saturdays specifically. That's a whole different topic.
Do you believe in deposits for chair time for current patients? Because I talk about that all the time.
100% for doctor treatment. We've never done it for we do it for SRP, which we consider treatment, and doctor treatment. We don't do it for hygiene recall or new patients or consults or whatever. But so going back to online scheduling, the argument can be, well, hey, those patients are higher no show rate. Okay, well, if your practice is humming at like max capacity and you've got very little space for patients to schedule appointments, then maybe it doesn't make sense for you to offer online scheduling. Or maybe you do take a deposit with those appointments. Unless you're one of those offices, if you've got open capacity, it's still worth it. And there's ways to kind of organize it. You can make it so people can only schedule online where there's certain blockouts in your software and Open Dental or whatever. And so that's how we do it. I attach specific blockouts to our online scheduling, and I can control where those blockouts go on the schedule, so that I do it as efficiently as possible. So if those patients do have a higher no-show rate, it doesn't impact the practice as much. So that is my argument there. Again, if you are listening and if you're listening and you've got no capacity in your practice, you probably need to be thinking about expanding hours, like we're talking about today, expanding facilities. You want to have open spots in your practice. And if you have open spots in your practice, you want to create as little barriers as possible for patients to schedule. And that's why open or online scheduling comes in. That's an easy one. Call center, I think, is even easier. The argument I get there is it's too expensive. And I've heard this from a lot of dentists. And I'll tell you what, I mean, Golden Goose, it is relatively expensive when you think about what it costs, because they charge you per new patient that shows up. There's a monthly fee that's fairly small. The main cost that we pay Golden Goose is for every patient they schedule who shows up. But I'll tell you what, even with how big our offices are, even with how many patients they're scheduling, one of those patients they schedule can offset the entire monthly cost of that call center.
Yes, 100%.
But
But you're
think
gonna get
about
more. You're gonna get way more than that anyway.
think about think about how many more patients schedule because you've got a dedicated call center with expanded hours that has a very high answer rate, that's trained on principles of persuasion and all this stuff. So again, I only plug companies that I use, and I've used Golden Goose since inception, and I'm a big fan of what they do,
We
and Dr.
we
Chris
recommend
Phelps.
Golden Goose all the time to clients, and
But I
never
have
had one
heard that
client come back and complain. Not one.
I've seen posts from dentists, hey, go, like, who do you recommend for call center? Golden Goose is too expensive or whatever it is. Or I've had dentists
They're
say,
the
I'm leaving
best.
Golden Goose because it's too expensive. Again, the amount of money that costs versus how much more revenue you can drive at your practice by all those extra patients that are being scheduled. It's like the cost of the call center is like a drop in the bucket. So, that's one of those instances where DIY, you're killing yourself. You're absolutely killing yourself if you're just trying to have your team answer the phones. Or I've had people, well, I hired a VA to answer the phones after hours, and like, we have that. That's a last resort if Golden Goose can't pick up the phone if they're log jammed. But like, again, you've got one person, and I'm sorry, guys. I cannot train somebody as well to answer the phone and schedule an appointment as a call center that's their main focus.
Dude, they answer thousands upon thousands of phone calls a month. They know more than any dentist does about answering the phone. The only person I think that border that is Laura Nelson from Front Office Rocks, because she's the phone queen for like 10 years and she's always adapting. But no one knows more about Golden. I mean, Golden Goose knows.
Think about how high turnover is in front office team members for dental offices. So you can send someone to training, you can get someone trained really well, and then they leave, and then you start fresh with someone else versus you've got a call center and they're so anyways, no affiliation whatsoever, no kickbacks, but I no endorsements. I wish, Chris, you probably should send us some money, but seriously though, I love what they've done. and there probably are other good call centers out there. I have not found one personally that I feel like can do as good of a job dental specific as Golden Goose, but you need to have, in my opinion, you need to have a call center answering the phone with expanded hours if you want you to reach your full growth capacity for your office. Um, so that's talking about expanded hours for scheduling. We touched on expanding your hours for your office. I want to recap real quick, and then we're going to wrap this episode up. If you're a young startup office, please hear me. I am not saying that you need to open Saturday or Sunday hours or a bunch of evening hours or whatever. I think it can be helpful to have some. And again, that's why I did one evening a week, one early morning a week when we first opened. But I do think if you are intentional about your marketing and your branding and your internal marketing and your patient experience, I think you can grow a very, very successful startup without having a whole bunch of expanded hours. On that same note, I would highly recommend not opening your office 7 days a week because it's going to be challenging you're going to have a lot of downtime. You're going to have extra overhead, extra staff time. You're going to have harder time keeping people. So if you're a young startup and you want to do a Saturday or maybe 2 Saturdays a month and you don't mind working that and whatever, yeah, go for it. But I'm not saying you need to do that. Where I think it can be beneficial is as your practice is growing, as you're trying to, add opportunities for more revenue, and especially if you have an opportunity present itself. Like, guys, when I was fresh out of school, I was working in public health. I was doing Saturdays at a DSO to bring in some extra money. So there are definitely plenty of young dentists out there that, especially if they're newer in their career and they're hungry and they want to make, and especially if you're younger, you don't have kids. Or to Matt's point, there's people that are just, looking for part-time work and, maybe it's an older dentist, maybe their kids are grown and they don't really do a lot on Saturday mornings. And so they're like, hey, I wouldn't mind coming in and working a Saturday a month or, whatever it is. So I think if the opportunity presents itself, it can be beneficial. I think the big picture takeaway from this whole episode is keep an open mind. Again, in the beginning, I was very against adding weekend hours to our group. And then when the data or when the opportunity or whatever presented itself and it made sense, I was willing to change my mindset and be like, you know what, this actually makes a lot of sense. We should do it. So, and I think that applies to everything as a business owner. That's not just, again, we talked about passing on credit card fees. I don't think it's a bad thing to have strong opinions, but I do think you need to hear the opposing side. You need to see the evidence and you need to explore it. And when it makes sense, you need to be confident and comfortable enough to change your mindset and not have a problem with doing that. So,
So we're gonna wrap this up here. I'm gonna make two comments and we're gonna close this out. Um, to go along with the style of something Andrew said, if you're a startup doc and you are listening to this, I will tell you it's a giant failure to not have a product like Golden Goose after hours. You need to have it. It's indispensable. You need it. If you're a doc listening or your doc that wants to grow, any doc, I think it's a giant mistake, no matter what kind of practice you have, no matter anything, not having that communication tool after hours when you can't is a massive mistake. The other thing Andrew's talking about here, and this is kind of it, is if you think about a spider web, there's different like outer circles, right? I think the marketing is your very outer circles have bigger gaps. But as it comes in and gets tighter, I think all these systems and processes with like phone answering and appointment booking and all these different avenues are the inner circle where you have a higher probability of capturing these patients. We're talking about capturing tools after hours and different availability and different convenience. And if you think about it that way, it makes a whole lot of sense. So we're going to wrap this up today. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening. Me and Andrew do not have sponsors. No one pays to play to get on our show. If we mention a product like Golden Goose, it's because we've seen massive success with it. We've seen comments in the Facebook groups, and Andrew's had success with it. We only talk about things we believe in on some level that we've really seen success. Please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you guys so much for spending time with us and have a great day.